Hello, hello, this is Arcades, and welcome to a bit of a discussion video for Stormworks Build and Rescue. They just released info about one of the next major things they're doing for Stormworks, and it is compressed gases. And yeah, this is going to be an interesting subject. I am kind of well versed in this from another game.
You know what? Screw it. I'm doing it.
Raw material processed. Credits deposited.
Yeah, and well, I mean, we saw what happened there, but so let's actually get into what they said. Okay, so here's the article they put up. Says in a post we discuss upcoming changes to fluid pressure as new support for compressed gases. This update is planned to release for months, but we have been working hard on these mechanics, and there's loads to discuss. So basically, they go over to talk about how, things are right now and what they were really wanting to watch out for. Like they didn't want to break vehicles, and since there was enough, support from the community, they decided to go ahead and do this, and they're reworking it. The existing mechanics don't allow air to be contained in custom space tanks or compressed into a smaller container. This isn't realistic, but the idea is to make the game simpler, where a container is already full of air. There's no space for fuel unless you allow air to compress and also allow backflow or add some kind of relief valve. The risk is that, like in real plumb systems, you can get airlock where trapped air can block flow. I'm not a plumber, and I have seen results of what happens when air gets in there. Basically, they made it to where right now air can't be in a custom tank. It can be in if you've seen like a few other YouTubes, they've had issues where they're trying to stock a whole bunch of fuel into the thing and all of a sudden they can't fill it up, but they don't know why. It's because air actually got trapped in there. I've even had issues with some of my hydrojet boat, the one I have called Bottle Rocket, because it's a hydrojet boat. Problem is when it gets out of the water, air would get into the vents and would lock up the hydrojets, and thus it couldn't work because air was in the line. So, and the only way to fix that was to make a relief pipe that would allow the air to escape. When the water starts coming back into the system, it would push the air out through the relief valve while the water went through and reached the hydrojets. So this is kind of what they're talking about, and even this isn't just exclusive to water. Like, I just did a video about alternates for cleaning oil spills. The fire hose got clogged with oil because it had no place to go, because that's where it wasn't allowed to go. So in the same mechanic here, or the same idea, is that the air gets stuck in places it's not supposed to go and just ends up blocking. Except what they did is that when it gets to a custom tank, it just goes bye-bye. It just disappears. So it couldn't be stored in there. So this allowing you to still fuel stuff and such. So that way is a way to get rid of it. At least that's my thought on the subject. Remember, this is just conjecture by me and is not official statement by anybody, but this is just my thought process on how they do it, and continuing for what I know about the game and what I've done. That's where I think they're going with it. Now, they've always strived in the game, from what I can tell, is they want to try to resemble reality, but not exactly be realistic. So they wanted to at least have some form of basis in reality, but not exactly reality itself, to make the game simpler and easier to enjoy for people. So they can resemble the real-life systems without actually having to be the specifics of it. And a lot of people have noted the difference between stuff in this game and that in real life. And you know what? That's fine. It's a sandbox. If everything's made out of sand, it's all going to act like sand. And that's basically how everything works in the game. So this is already a pretty cool idea that they're doing. So like I said, we'll allow backflow. or add some kind of relief valve. So that basically meaning that something can actually go backwards through the pipe if it has greater pressure than what you're pushing forward. They already have kind of, I've seen this, especially when I was talking with somebody recently about the oil filtering stuff that I saw him doing, and his engine cooling was having issues. And I was like, hey, look, you've got it hooked up this way. You're causing flow going in this manner. And eventually he did get around to it, but there was also something else that was causing an issue on top of that. And because he was able to get that fixed. Anyways, I digress. All right. Simply adding special compressed air tanks isn't great because it doesn't make sense that air behaves differently in a different container and doesn't match up with the existing simplified flow and pressure mechanics. So it's better to rework the existing pressure and flow system, generally allow compression, and for flow and pressure to also consider compression. This is definitely a good idea. I mean, you could just put in like simple containers, say, hey, add pressure, and it just adds flow to the system. You know, like a pressure, just adds pressure to the flow. And they probably could be able to, but then there would be irregularities that would the irregularities of the current system, and I bet you this is why they're doing it, is that it would stand out. Like these things that were breaking before on the extreme builds. I'm talking like people who were actually trying to push the system to its limits to see what you can do were probably breaking. And then this comes in, and if they were to do that, it would just instantly make all that. It was obviously making the flaws of the system come out constantly. So it was easier. It was probably easier, instead of trying to fix what's already there, is just to rip it out, lay down a new foundation of a system, and put it all in, trying to use what they have. So they're probably salvaging as much as they can within the confines of what they've already built, and they're redoing it. Because most of it's probably just going to be math. So this is, again, their approach to it is a good thing for this part. Some would definitely disagree with it, but I think under what they probably have available to them within the game's engine, and realizing that there was probably a lot of flaws in the old system that really didn't come up unless the situation of this, that is now they're like, okay, we got to work on this. So this is where this is going. That's basically to say, like, we just got to restart from the foundation. We have a foundation. We're going to rebuild there, and we'll just start back up. So that's good. All right. We're developing a new system where pressure in real-world units, atmospheres, pressure directly relates to compression, where gas occupies a tenth the volume at 10 atmospheres compared to 1 atmosphere. By adding compression and directly deriving pressure from this compression, you get a simple system that reflects the real world. So again, like I said, they're not trying to be the real world, but they are trying to use it as a guideline to create a system that works for the game. And that's fine. They're using atmospheres, which is a real world thing. And the thing, though, I have is this is kind of a weird statement. They said a tenth of the volume at 10 atmospheres compared to 1 atmosphere. I mean, that's a tenth of the volume at 10 atmospheres would pretty much be 1 atmosphere. I might be misunderstanding the wording. That is possibly me. So, yeah. Fluid flows from high pressure to low pressure. The rate of flow is driven by the different pressure, and once pressure equalizes, flow stops. So, pumps, the small pumps and the large pumps, their difference in the capabilities will become a lot more important probably. Now, before you could literally just stab the pump right at the exit port and you get the most effective use out of it, and it was just an idea of making sure you had an inflow that matched it. And I think most of the old system was basically just a, hey, we have this here. It's so far from the target output. So if it's this far away, then we do this X. So that's why it's always good to put the pump like right at the exit to shoot it out, and it will get the greatest result versus putting it at the beginning, letting it travel through the pipes and coming the other side. At least that's my experience with building. That's where I have always done it. And it seems to work really well, especially with like the fire, the turret cannons, the fluid cannons. It's always been the greatest. Always put the pump like right below it. This might make it a bit different to where it sounds like they might just... If you have a slow pump at the beginning and then the big pump at the back, you might actually get it to draw through the small pump faster because the big pumps are creating a much bigger pressure difference on their backside from the front side, and you'll just rip fluid through the small ones unless there's a flow limiter they put on the small pumps. Don't know yet. We'll find out. And you can actually replace some large pumps with small pumps because the main pump that you want to have, where the major pressure needs to be at, you can put it up there. Or it might be the other way around too. You might have a big pump with a large pressure output on the backside, creating a backfill of pressure in the system. It hits a small pump and then just forces it through. Now, that is also assuming, like I said, that there's not a flow restriction on the small pump. If there's not a flow restriction on the small pump, then that extra pressure will push through it. And all you're doing is just adding to the flow rate. Small pumps don't exactly have the best pressure, but they do help maintain flow really well. So in some systems, you can have a bunch of small pumps with the main big pump at your target to make it easier, and it generally works out really well. I've done it many times. It does work pretty well. The small pumps are good for maintaining, or any time where pressure isn't a big deal. Now, compartments. Custom tanks in sealed areas can now contain air. This air can be compressed and flow. This makes resolving flow through doors much more complex, but has been interesting to develop. The existing mechanic only allows for fluid to overflow from one compartment through a door to the next. With compressed gases, now you can have gases blow out or rush in, while fluids still need to level out. This is quite complex, considering the situation where one side of a door there is high water level but low pressure, but on the other there is lots of highly compressed gas, but only a little water. What happens when the door opens moment by moment? Okay, so it always seemed that in the game that a door was considered open or closed. Yes, graphically you had a door sliding, but mechanically at data it was either on or off, because the moment you click that door, you'd get the graphic for the stuff coming in. Whether or not they actually had a progression of how much that door was open, I'm not sure. So, when they say moment by moment, what are they considering? Are they considering the actual pressure equalization? Because I'm assuming that the moment you open that door, the air pressure is going to equalize, as well as the fluid level is going to equalize. Now, I'm assuming what they're saying is that the high pressure gas will blow in first, which will end up pushing the water out. and then it'll equalize. It'll eventually equalize. The question is what will happen. You'll probably actually get sucked into the room with the lot of water and then blown back out because the water's rushing out. Air will move way faster than water easily. Now, I wonder how they're going to take in the effect of water pressure. That's the big one. Because water, in real life, is incompressible. Basically, liquids are incompressible. That's kind of not true either, because solids are basically compressed fluids. I know somebody's going to rip me about this, but the fact is it's about the molecules not moving, whereas liquid is about the molecules, they're close together, but they can move. It's weird. I'm not a physicist or scientist of that degree, but it's, that's my base understanding. So, yeah, and to put it simply, what you might see is something like this from this game for me.
Air pressure level decreasing.
As you saw there, what happened in that game is it still wasn't perfectly simulated in that game, but when I made those final cuts in that game, there was air pressure in the room on the other side of that door. And the game glitched out a little bit, but it has mechanics for air pressure loss. And it assumed the door had been compromised and started shooting the air out and launched it. I'm waiting to see with the new system stuff like that. Okay, so now we have delta height. Within the pipe systems, currently delta height equals pressure. This is a mechanic we plan to remove because the complexity it introduces and how confusing it can be when playing Stormworks, especially with the introduction of compression. By giving compartments a single pressure value, it's a lot easier to play and understand compared to pressure being different based on height inside the compartment. Okay, so right now as it stands, like when you go, I did a video earlier with the refineries, and I showed an example of a big tall refinery tank I'd made where putting the pump at the top and a pump at the bottom and then another pump in the middle allowed me to maintain a certain level of value of flow. And if I removed any of those pumps, it would affect it. The delta, meaning the difference from one point to another between two set data points. I believe I might be wrong on the exact terminology, but for the most part, in every repeating value, it's a difference between the one before it. So if you go 1, 3, 5, 7, that's a delta of 2 because you're going up by 2 each time. But if you go 1, 3, 6, 8, 2, 8, 12, those are different delta values because that's, 2, 3, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. Because it's the difference between the previous number and the current number, or the current number and the next number. That's how I understand it. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me if you. And so they're getting rid of that system. So instead of the delta between the bottom of the tank, and this is the tank, not compared to the world, but the bottom of the tank versus the top of the tank, they're getting rid of that effect. So the difference between the bottom of and the top of where the final port is at, that's where, actually no. That does relate to a tank, but I think they mean the difference between height from the lowest point of the intake in the system to the highest where you're actually outputting at. So if your thing does all wonky stuff, that height matters in, but the final part will make the difference. No. But there is a difference issue here. So, airlock. If air can no longer be created or destroyed, this does mean that air can be trapped and build up pressure. Or a lack of air can mean that a vacuum resists a tank from emptying fluid. This is the downside of this rework. While it might be realistic, you may sometimes need to understand a bit about pressure and plumbing. We are adding new gas and liquid relief valves to allow air pressure to escape or be drawn back into vacuums to solve this issue. What do you think? Is it a more powerful fluid system or more difficult to play? Okay, so I am hoping that all of this, it's going to add more richness to the game. I think the delta pressure system was annoying because this will actually allow us to pump out submarines instead of having to use cheats like the manifold system. And it will just be a big improvement for the game. I mean, it's being able... it's the excitement of what can come from this and the things we can do. It adds a whole new layer to the game to allow better, more interesting creations. Not just the ones that are more replica-based that some people like to do, but this will also add more to the... Because you're going to see now... So with the changes to the system, they're going to make it to where this ship, which I have nicknamed Bottle Rocket, will go from a manipulation of fluid system to possibly a literal bottle rocket. And you will see these effects of stuff like this happening because literally it's pressure forcing the water through a system instead of just manipulating, water flow. And on top of certain other physics effects, but, that's the point. Is that you will have things like this that will be literal rockets instead of just pretend rockets through pressure dynamics. And the question is how much will we be able to break that system to do stuff like this? Because like I said, this is just manipulation of fluids. That's all I'm doing, and using hydrojets. And I call it bottle rocket because all I'm doing is containing water in this space. Now, what if I add high pressure air in here? What will that do to the system? What will that do to the performance of hydrojets? What will that do to the performance of vents? What will that just... There is a number of things. I mean, can you imagine if you were adding... oh my god. Like, even if you just added air scoops, you're moving this fast. And they're putting pressure into a system they're feeding in there. The question is also, if you have overpressurized things, does it cause damage? And it just... There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things. We won't know until they actually bring it out, and they said it's going to be months, so we'll just see how it goes from there. Anyways, so I hope you enjoyed what you watched. Hope you like what you saw. Hope you leave a comment. Tell me what do you think. If you have anything, correct me on some of my statements if you think I need to be corrected. I'm more than willing to have discussion. And, yeah. Hope you had a good time. Like I said, hope you enjoyed what you watched. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that fun junk. Helps me on the channel. And, yeah. I'll catch you on the flip side. This is Arcades, signing out. Have yourself a good day.